That makes it even worse.
All right, John, let's remember that we are in the holy presence of God, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. For the sake of the sorrowful passion, have mercy on us, on the whole world. St. John looks to us out, with Jesus in our hearts. And the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Gentlemen that are at home, don't forget to type your name into the team's chat. Really glad that I'm going to be able to stop saying that soon. Yes. Okay, so couple reminders here as we get started for today. Number one, your Cold War essay. That's going to be the first half of class today. It's talking about that assignment that is due this Thursday by 11:59 p.m. The last major assignment of the semester. It's worth a good chunk of points, so it can swing your grade for the better or for the worse. So take this assignment seriously. What's up, Davis?
Do you want us to make it in a graphic organizer again, or just type it on a Word doc?
Typing it on a Word doc is the preferred method for this time. Yes. Although, if you're doing it on the graphic organizer, you can just copy and paste it and it turns into a Word doc easily enough. So that is due by 11:59 p.m. It's the essay. We'll talk about that more in 1 second, exactly what I want. And then reminder that the optional soapstone is due on Friday this week. So if you guys are interested in getting one last grade in the books, take advantage of that assignment. Again, refer to what your grade is before you do that assignment. If it's worthless to you to do it, probably don't do it. I mean, if you want to do it for fun, I can't stop you. I'll just make fun of you for being weird. It's okay. Do that for most students. All right. So we have two goals today. Number one is we're going to talk about the Cold War essay, just do a quick review of what our writing assignments should look like, and to give you guys some more specific advice for how to tackle this specific essay. From there, because you guys can't really reasonably stop me, I'm also going to talk today about college essay writing. Indeed. I have some thoughts and some opinions on the subject, and I would like to help you guys get better at college essay writing so that you guys can get into the colleges of your choice. We'll talk about that after we talk about the essay that's due more immediately. All right, so for essays in Mr. Marshall's class and elsewhere, we start off with a question, and you respond to that question with a thesis. So the question for this essay is very broad. How did the U.S. change during the Cold War? Can somebody remind me, what does our thesis kind of look like? What's the rough template of a thesis in response to this essay question? Nick?
The U.S. changed over the Cold War through blank, blank, and blank.
Perfect. Because of blank, blank. Yeah. So you want to make sure you're restating the question, adding because to make your statement argumentative, and then listing 3 prongs is an easy way to make sure that your thesis is well defended. It is persuasive in its goals. All right. So this essay right here refers to the last 3 lectures of the class. The 1950s, Civil Rights Movement, and this most recent lecture on the 1960s. So from those 3 lectures, we can go ahead and use that information to help us figure out what goes in those blanks, what prongs we might want to use for this essay. So I think it might be useful to go over a few possible ideas for these prongs together. If you guys want to choose any of the ones we read up on the board right now and use them for your essay, cool. If you want to use entirely different ones, also completely fine. I will remind us here, for essays that deal with change, it's really useful to use words like improving or declining, like getting better, getting worse. That usually is more indicative of change. Can somebody give me like what's one topic that we've talked about in the last 3 lectures that might be a good thing to talk about in terms of the changing United States? David?
Fear of communism.
Ooh. So one possible prong is increased or decreased. You could honestly go either way depending on how you argue it. Increased fear of communism. Yeah, that's something that's come up in the last few lectures. I like that. Or you could say the fear is getting lower. That's also okay. What other things could we bring up? Some of these larger topics that we've talked about recently. Ken? You got to do some increasing or decreasing there. If we're talking about, think about it a little bit more broadly than just the Korean War. You got to give me something that's changed. Yeah, the 50s changed, but like what has changed throughout the 50s? Korean War is a good thing to talk about, but how do we turn the Korean War into a trend? Can we connect it to other conflicts?
Yeah, I can't think of one.
Come on.
Increase consumerism. That's not related to that.
Yeah, increase consumerism or decrease. I mean, again, for a lot of these, you could argue both directions if you wanted to. I mean, you should only pick one. Were you helping Mrs. Shannon now, paper?
No.
Okay.
Increase in proxy wars? Or well, actually, kind of yes.
I like next. What do you have, paper?
Wait, what did you say?
He said increase in proxy wars.
Actually, I was gonna say increase in technology. But that's kind of
Yeah, you can talk about the changing technology of it's in war or in peacetime. Or more proxy wars. Harper?
I was gonna say increase fear of the destruction of the world.
Oh, yeah, you could say decrease confidence in the world. Yeah, something that we've seen again and again, like how it leads to people being afraid that the world's going to end, or that our society is crumbling around us.
Like a changing culture.
Yeah, again, you want to be a little bit more specific than just a cultural revolution. You want to say we're getting more diverse in our culture. We're going from that culture of conformity in the 1950s to this counterculture in the 1960s. Very different. There's a couple more diverse cultures. There's a couple different prongs you can choose. You can use other ones outside of that. Like you can talk about, hey, increased rights for women, increased rights for Black Americans. All that stuff happens in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s too. So feel free to choose any of these prongs out of the board. Choose other ones. That's fine too. And plug that into that template for your thesis. To remind us here, we have 3 distinct elements of our argumentative essay. We have an opening, the body, and the conclusion. For the opening, there are 2 distinct elements. There's your thesis, which we've already talked about above. You're just taking your thesis and putting it in your opening paragraph. But there's also context that you need to give your reader background information about the subject so they can understand your argument. So if we're dealing with context of the Cold War, what happened before the Cold War that might be useful for your readers to know about and for you to mention at the start of your paper? What happens before the Cold War? Philip? Yeah, World War II. Absolutely. Anything else? Might be useful to talk about. It might be useful to talk about the communist capitalist divide that we have going on. It might be useful to talk about nuclear power, if that's something that's relevant to the prongs of the thesis that you end up choosing. These nuclear power was invented before the Cold War. and it helps set the stage for what the Cold War becomes. That's the kind of background information that might be useful to you. So you want to start off with context, talk about stuff that's happening before the Cold War to help set up your paper. Then you want to lay out your thesis for your reader. And then you move on to body paragraphs, of which you should have 3 in the standard 5-paragraph essay format. So you want to start off your body paragraph with a topic sentence. Again, a topic sentence is a way to help guide your reader through your paper. It's to tell them up front, this paragraph is about this. Your reader should be able to read just your topic sentence and know what your entire paragraph is about without reading anything else. That's the goal. What's the easiest way to make a topic sentence? Parker? Yeah, use your thesis, but only use the problem that's relevant. Do a little copy and pasting if you need to. So instead of, so you would make this the U.S. change over the course of the Cold War because of increased rights for women. Because of increasing? Yeah. It's just an easy way to help guide your reader as to saying, hey, here's what part of the paper you're currently in. This is the part of the paper that's going to deal with women's rights. Then you want to present evidence to back up your argument. Your opinion does not matter. If you guys make a claim about history, I have no reason to believe you guys. I have no reason to believe anybody about anything. The thing that causes me to be persuaded, which is the goal of your paper, is if you can provide good evidence to support your argument. For us here in this essay, your evidence is primarily coming from our lecture notes. You guys are going to try to give me specific examples or events in history that help support your claim. So if you're saying women's rights are improving, well, what are some pieces of evidence that prove that? You might highlight something like the sexual revolution that we talked about in lecture, or the publication of the Feminine Mystique that we talked about in this 1960s lecture. That helps support your argument. Nick?
We only need 2 evidence.
Yeah, 2 evidence is the minimum. Some cases, 3 is stronger. If you get past like 4 or 5, things get messy. So I think somewhere in the range of 2 to 4 is usually appropriate. But again, your evidence is not enough. Just saying Betty Friedan published the Feminine Mystique is not a very compelling argument. It's good evidence, but you do need to provide your own analysis, your own input for why that matters. You need to tell the reader very clearly, this proves that women were gaining rights because if your topic sentence about women increasing their rights, after your evidence, you need to explain to your reader, well, why does this matter? Why does the Feminine Mystique matter? Why does the sexual revolution matter? Well, you'd say, hey, this proves that women were gaining rights because as part of the sexual revolution, women gained more cultural, women gained better access to divorce, which helped with their quality of life. It gave them more freedom in their marriages. Something like that is an explanation. It's not just saying, here's the stuff Mr. Marchiner said. That doesn't show me any critical thinking. The analysis is where you jump in and prove to me you guys can create a cohesive argument. Oh my goodness. Format got so screwed up here. Why? Lastly, you got a conclusion sentence of your body paragraph. Now, Mr. Poggi, how do you make a conclusion sentence?
Basically, restating your initial idea.
Boom. Yeah. Easiest way to do this, if you want to do the training wheels method, just copy and paste your topic sentence. Training wheels. Like, if you guys are big boys, you guys can do more than just copying and pasting. You can do some restatement. You might be able to make some good transitions to your next paragraph or whatever. The training wheels way, which is perfectly fine for our purposes, is just saying, hey, reader, you just read a paragraph about this. I just proved this to you. And again, for 5-paragraph essays, it feels kind of silly to do. Just remember, you'll be writing 20-page essays in college. So doing these reminders are really important for that purpose. So that's why we're doing them now as practice. Hey, reader, you just spent 5 pages reading about this topic. That's important to say after they just read 5 pages about the topic. Otherwise, they get lost real easily. And then lastly, you have a conclusion paragraph. Conclusion paragraph, we want to do 2 things. Number 1, restate your thesis. And number 2, extend your argument. There are 2 ways I recommend you do this second point. You can talk about how, because your thesis is true, it leads to something else happening. Or that your thesis is representative of a larger theme or trend in U.S. history. If these 2 things sound familiar, it's because that's what the significance has been every time we've talked about that, like those identifications and whatever else we've done in this class. The easy way to say, hey, I proved my thesis about how the U.S. has changed, and that leads to our modern world looking the way it does. Or it represents how we've tried to do a better job of becoming equal over our history. Those are good extensions of your argument. You've proven your argument. Extension is going 1 step further if possible. Okay.
How do we just like restate our pros?
There's a couple different ways to restate your thesis. Or are you talking for the restate of your thesis in the conclusion?
Like on the download thing, so restate thesis without pros and it says restate from 1. Restate.
Yeah. So the way that I think is usually strongest is to do what I have on the paper there, where I just like, hey, the U.S. has changed a lot over the Cold War. Women have gained increased rights as demonstrated through the sexual revolution and the publication of the Feminine Mystique. Black Americans have also gained more rights. Like that's how you frame it. It's like you take your thesis and you kind of summarize each step of it to show your reader, like, here's all the stuff I've proven over the course of this whole essay. This is a bull terrier, I believe. They're very silly looking dogs. Very good, very good dog. Good. Okay. Questions about the Cold War essay before we move on? Let's then talk about your college essays. All right. So, college essays. Recently, a couple of teachers and myself have been talking about college admissions at Calvert Hall, trying to improve them. And when we reached out to some admissions departments of colleges, one of the weaknesses that they identified for Calvert Hall applications were college essays. We apparently have not been doing a great job on writing these college essays. So that's why I'm going to spend some time today helping you guys understand what a college essay is about, give you some advice on how you should go about writing them. Again, you guys might be hearing about college essays from several different sources. I'm just one of them. I'm going to give you guys what I think is the best advice possible. One of the goals in this process is that you guys will be hearing from multiple people, and you have to synthesize the advice and feedback that you're given and make educated decisions about how to proceed. Obviously, I think I'm the best, but that's because, of course, I would think that. I'm the person saying this. But I have done some research into the subject, and I know a little bit of what I'm talking about, I think. Okay, so what is the purpose of a college essay? Well, college essays have no purpose for most schools. For most colleges that you guys apply to, they just look at numbers. If you have the GPA, if you have the SAT scores or whatever, you're either in or you're out. Some colleges, it's just a checklist box. Hey, this kid, he's written the college essay, cool. It doesn't really matter too much one way or the other for your admissions. Where it does matter are the more highly competitive schools. These are schools that are like your reach schools. Because if you guys apply to an Ivy League, You're competing with other kids across the country who have also taken honors and AP classes that probably have reasonable SAT scores, have extracurriculars and everything. College essays are the way to differentiate yourself from the rest of the candidates, to make yourself more appealing than everybody else that applies to that school, to give you an edge. So college essays, they only really matter if they matter. But when you're applying to these highly competitive schools, these reach schools of yours, you got to do a good job with them, or otherwise you're not going to compete. So, when we write college essays, this is a slightly different process than how you guys have written essays in the past. College essays are much more reflective. We have to think about yourself, who you are, your identity, and then use that to shape an argument about yourselves. Something that we don't do a lot of practice with here at Calvert Hall. So that means we have to put more time and energy into this college essay to make sure that we do a good job on this. When you guys get a college essay, there's a question. It's usually not just saying write a college essay. It's usually like, give me a time in your life when you've done this. Or tell me a story about this part of your life. Those usually are the questions. You guys do want to make sure that you A the Q, answer the question. Because if you don't A the Q, what happens? You get F'd in the A, failed in the assessment. You guys don't want to be failed in the assessment by not answering the question. So when a college essay gives you a question, you got to make sure you answer. You can't just start talking about something random. You guys aren't like politicians in a debate or whatever. You guys actually have to answer the question, or otherwise your college essay gets tossed away. But, and this is a big however here, every college essay secretly carries with it the same question. Like the text of the question might change, but the subtextual question remains the same over every college essay that you'll ever write. And that subtextual question, the one you have to dig a little bit deeper to get to, is why should the college admit you to their school? That's the question you're actually answering through your college essays. Answering the actual question, that's important, but you also have to answer that secondary question as well. Because that's what these college essays are about. Why are you the guy we should choose to be in our college? That's a tough question to answer. So that is your goal. I think the easiest way to approach that question of why should this college choose you is to be interesting. If you're more interesting than a guy with the exact same transcript as yourself, well, they're going to pick you, the interesting guy, over the boring guy most of the time. Well, the logical progression from there is what makes you interesting. That could be tough to do. There are 1,000 different ways to be interesting. You can save infants from lion attacks. That's pretty darn interesting. If you guys have done that, make your college essay about your baby-saving adventures. Please do that. Easy way to get into college. For a lot of us, we've saved very few toddlers and infants from lions over the years. So we have to find other ways to present ourselves as interesting. I think the two easiest ways to do this on a college essay are, number one, growth. To talk about yourself as a person and how your character has improved over time. You're talking about, hey, I've been through some challenges in my life. I have grown as a person because of those challenges, and I am now pretty awesome as a result. It's a pretty compelling way to make yourself sound interesting, is to say, hey, I've become cool because I have grown as a person. So that is one approach. The other approach is to talk about passion. What are you passionate about? So growth says to colleges, you're answering the question, you should accept me into your school because I'm growing as a person, and you're kind of implying that I'll continue to grow. For passion, the way that you make yourself interesting is you say, I am intellectually diverse. I am unique on my own individual when it comes to my passions and interests, and that makes me interesting. So for passion, there's two things you have to do. You have to, number one, identify what are you passionate about. And then you guys also need to demonstrate some kind of evidence of how you are actually passionate about that thing. You can't just say, I like math. If you are passionate about math, cool. There needs to be some people like that in life, or otherwise civilization crumbles. But that doesn't mean anything that you're passionate about math. You have to show these college advisors, these admissions counselors, well, how have I been passionate about this? What have I done to pursue my passions? It's not just saying I like math, it's saying I like math and I've done this because I like math. Or if you say, I like history, so you're a real nerd, don't just say, hey, I like history. Say like, hey, I've read more books than I've had to about history because I've been really excited about this subject. Or I've done these internships, or I've done these experiences that have helped me pursue that topic in a way that most high schoolers don't do. That makes you interesting. That makes you unique. That gets you into college. So growth or passion are your starting out points, I think, for how you come across as interesting. If you've never cured a disease or battled a lion, that's how I probably approach it. When you actually go to write your college essays, it's a different experience from what you guys have probably been used to previously. You're not taking the exact same format that we're using for our Cold War essay and using that for your college essay. The things I would think about are twofold. Number one, you are arguing on behalf of yourself. So treat this a little bit like it is an argumentative essay, where you're declaring your thesis. Hey, here's why I'm cool, colleges. That's your thesis. You provide evidence to support your argument. That here's some things I've done to show how cool I am. You kind of tell the college why that matters to you, analyze it. And then you conclude by saying, hey, you should accept me into your school. But that's the rough kind of mental structure you're going to create for these essays. It should not look like my Cold War essay format here. It shouldn't be a 5-paragraph essay response. That's a little bit too structured. That's a little bit too hardcore for a college essay, which is supposed to be a little bit more casual and relaxed. Not a lot more, but a little bit more. The other way you might be useful to think about it is it's a framed narrative. You're telling a story about who you are or something that you've done, and you're framing that around this larger argument of, hey, I'm cool, you should admit me into your college. So there isn't a set structure for how to write your college essay, for how each paragraph should look. But again, I would think about it as a flowing of argument. Of saying, hey, I'm cool, I've done these things that show how cool I am, and that's why you should have it. Or here's my story, beginning, middle, and end, and here's how it ties to me as an individual. Those are two good approaches. So what should you not do? Here's some quick hits for some big common mistakes I've seen in college essays. Number one, repeating your transcript. You guys are already sending a lot of information to colleges about who you are. If you guys, in those transcripts, the colleges read them, don't write about that stuff again in your college essay. Your college essay is prime real estate to argue your case to colleges, to show them how interesting you are and why they should have you. If you're just repeating yourself of stuff they've already read, it's worthless. You just wasted this valuable space. So if you're like, I don't know, if you're like Mr. Owens and like the super all-star football player of the world or whatever, cool. Don't just make your college essay about here's all the amazing swim techniques I use to get past the offensive line. It tells them nothing new about yourself. Or if you're Sackley here, don't just say, I'm a robotics champion. Don't do that because they already know that from your transcript. Use that as a jumping off point to talk about yourself further. say, hey, because I'm a robotics champion, that's made me grow as a person. Or because I'm really good at rushing the passer, that's made me passionate about this. So don't just repeat your transcript, you're bringing something new to the table to your college essay. Can I tell you guys about the two? I'll get to that in a second, actually. Next up, college admissions counselors read hundreds, if not thousands, of your college essays. And they can tell pretty easily which ones are authentic and which ones are inauthentic. It doesn't help that teenagers are bad at lying. You guys get better with lying with age, fun fact. But you guys don't want to be inauthentic. You want to tell real stories and say real things about who you are, because that comes across as more sincere. And by the same token, one common thing I see, a lot of guys just say, the college essay is when I talk about adversity. Here's the adversity that I've encountered in life. Adversity is not a topic of an essay. Saying I had cancer is not actually a reason to admit you into a school. But that doesn't actually matter. It can be a jumping off point to say, hey, because I have cancer, here's how I've grown as a person, or I've become passionate about neuromedical research as a result. Like, that's good stuff to say. It's a good jumping off point. But college essays aren't just about adversity. It isn't just about bad things you've been through. Because that doesn't actually show any growth, doesn't show any passion. It's just bad stuff happens to everybody. Not to mention, guys, I guarantee there are going to be people out there that have suffered worse than you guys have. So if you're trying to do an adversity contest with other people, it's not likely you're going to win. I was come from the fresh off soccer team at Calvert Hall, and that's why you should admit me to your college. Okay. Mr. Marchand didn't call me on class one time when I had my hand raised. Okay, well, sure. Like, that could be a good topic for a college essay, but it's probably not. If you guys have suffered real adversity, feel free to talk about it. But only talk about it if it's relevant and it helps show these other things you're actually arguing in your paper. Thirdly here, see a lot of guys choosing topics that are very bad and that they don't like or care about. That's stupid. You guys want to know the two best college essays I've ever read? One was about cilantro and the other was about video games. Now, those are not obvious topics to write college essays about. Why were they the best? Well, the cilantro one was about the person discovering that they had this genetic condition that made cilantro taste incredibly soapy to them, to the point where they couldn't eat anything with cilantro in it. And how that propelled them into learning and getting internships in food science. She was really interested about that material. The one about video games was a Calvert Hall student writing about how he played strategy games like Sid Meier's Civilization with his friends at Calvert Hall. But again, it's a weird topic to choose, but he spun off of it really well. There was a jumping off point so he could talk about, hey, because I got interested in like international strategy games, that pursued me into studying Aztec history in a way that most high school students never look at it. He started with something that's kind of boring and mundane, something that doesn't seem like it's a good topic for a paper, but made it a really good essay because he got to explain a lot about who he was and what he was passionate about. So don't be afraid to choose a topic that's a little bit off the wall. That should not be a stumbling block. That should be encouraged. Again, prime real estate. That's what we're talking about here with the college essays. Don't spend a lot of time talking about things that aren't you. Colleges already know how great they are. Trust me, they have an inflated sense of ego. They don't need you guys to pump them up. Only talk about colleges if it's relevant, a specific college, if it's relevant to prove your paper. Say, hey, because I'm really interested in international studies, that's why I'm really interested in your college, because you have a good program. Don't spend a lot of time saying your program has been founded in 1865, and that's wasting space. Only talk about things that are relevant to your essay and proving your thesis. If you waste time talking about other stuff that doesn't matter, you wasted a chance to make your paper more persuasive. Lastly, now, this is a different kind of writing than you guys might be used to. That does not mean you have to throw out all writing lessons you've ever learned along with it. A lot of guys write a college essay and it sounds completely different from anything they've ever written before, and usually not in a flattering way. I have up on the screen here one of the worst college essays of all time. Let's do a little zoom in here so we can do this. I learned something that day. I learned that fish, when given too much food at once, die. That was the first time I had truly learned something. Guys, a lot of college essays kind of sound something similar to this. This is obviously atrocious, but it sounds something similar to this where it sounds really lame up front. Where you guys are trying to do this as a cool hook to bring your readers into your essay. College admissions counselors are paid money to read your essays. You don't actually have to like convince them to read it by having a really cool start of your paper. If you do, awesome. That makes your paper stronger, makes it more persuasive. But don't feel like you're pressed into needing this lame hook to get your reader into your paper. By the same token, avoid broad and sweeping statements that don't really mean anything. Like later on here, over the years, I learned more and more that there is a lesson in everything, and that every action has a consequence. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't prove that you should go to this college. It's just a waste of space. And it makes you sound like you're kind of dumb and don't know how to write anything. So try to avoid broad, sweeping statements. Try to write normally. Again, you're not going to write as stuffily as you would for a honors U.S. history essay. But at the same time, you guys aren't writing like a text to your friends either. There's got to be a balance between how formal it is and how much you can reflect upon yourself. So take that into account and try to write accordingly. You guys, in writing your college essays, should be showing them to several people. Calvert Hall teachers, guidance counselors, parents, brothers, theoretically sisters too. Show them to a lot of people. And understand that some of the advice you're given from those people is going to be good and you should very much incorporate in your papers. And that some of this advice that you're given from people, you might want to take with a grain of salt. If somebody's just like, I don't like your topic that you chose for your college essay, well, you might have to restart writing it from scratch, but it might just be, hey, how can I make this more accessible so that anybody could pick it up, read it, and like it? Because again, you don't want a college admissions counselor because you wrote it in like too casual of a style just to like throw it away, or to like not give it its due diligence because you came across as too casual. You want to make sure that you're being as accessible as possible to make sure that whoever reads your college essay is like, I want this guy in my school. He should go into this college over these other candidates. Okay. Any comments or questions about college essays? Harper? No. My college essay was terrible, though. It wasn't this bad, but it was terrible. Mine was about how I grew up with a speech impediment. Because in my mind, I was like, I just have to talk about adversity in my college essay. So my only adversity was I couldn't talk right. And like, sure, that could be a good essay topic as a jumping off spot, but that was like my entire essay was, I had a speech impediment and I was brave and overcame my fear of speaking in public. The end. That's a garbage essay to write. Don't be like Mr. Marchstein when he was in high school. Write and persuade your audience that you're pretty awesome. Gentlemen, I'd be glad to look at college essays. If you ever want to send them to me, I will give feedback on them. I'm happy to do so. Reminders, cohort essay is due on Thursday, 5:59 p.m. And the optional soapstone is due on Friday. Gentlemen, have a good rest of the day. See you. Cheech indeed.
We don't even know what it is yet. Read your